Rain danced across the palace windows like tiny silver drummers tapping out a secret song. Inside the great golden halls of Leora, the kingdom still slept, wrapped in soft shadows and dreams. But not the birds. Oh no. The birds of the royal aviary had already begun their dawn chorus, a whirl of chirps and whistles that swirled through the marble corridors and slipped beneath the closed doors like ribbons of sound. Down in the palace kitchens, something strange was happening. The oven flames flickered, but no sweet smells rose. The mixing bowls sat still, no spoon spinning, no flour floating in the air. And the royal baker, Master Thistlewhip, stood with his eyes wide and whisk frozen in midair. For the first time in 20 years, he had received no order, no scroll, no instruction. There was no cake to bake, no icing to whip, no candles to count. Outside, the royal garden shimmered with dew. The roses had opened early, as if expecting someone. The peacocks fanned their tails in perfect polished circles, ready for a parade. Even the butterflies gathered near the gate, wings trembling with excitement. But no trumpets sounded. No bunting fluttered. No laughter rang through the corridors. In her tower room, little maid Anwen paused while tying a ribbon around a basket of fresh lavender. She tilted her head, listening for the usual flurry of footsteps and birthday cheer. None came. Her finger stille, her heart skipped. In the tallest chamber of the east wing, the Queen of Leora sat before her mirror, brushing her silver-streaked hair in long, careful strokes. Her eyes, wise and deep as forest pools, looked out over her kingdom with quiet calm. Yet the morning passed, and no one came knocking. No cards arrived, no songs were sung. The queen smiled softly at her reflection. But behind her eyes, a flicker of something dimmed, something forgotten, something important. The morning sun climbed higher, melting away the mist on the palace turrets. Down below, the cobbled paths of Leora began to hum with life merchants unfurling their canopies, guards polishing their breastplates, and children laughing as they chased soap bubbles across the square. Yet none of them knew what the day was meant to be. Not even the oldest villagers remembered. Only one person seemed to sense that something was amiss. Anwen, the young maid, tiptoed through the palace halls with a furrowed brow and her basket of lavender still untouched. She peeked into the kitchen's quiet. She glanced into the ballroom empty. She climbed the spiral stairs that led to the throne room, and there she paused, her hand resting on the carved banister. A tapestry hung beside her, rich with golden thread and deep blue silk. It told the story of Queen Meralda's coronation, long ago, when the sky had bloomed with fireworks and the rivers had glittered with floating lanterns. Anwen's eyes traced the image of the young queen, her crown alight with diamonds. The girl whispered to herself, remembering something her grandmother had once told her. The queen's birthday is marked not by song, but by the stir of magic. Anwen's gaze darted to the windows. Outside, the birds were still restless, flying in tight circles above the castle. The roses turned their heads toward the throne room, as though waiting for someone to arrive. And beneath the clouds, a single silver moth fluttered across the sun. She gasped. The silver moth was no ordinary insect. It appeared only once a year, on the queen's birthday. It brought with it the gentle shimmer of enchantment, like moonlight dipped in dew. Its arrival meant joy, celebration, and a wish. But now, it flitted alone, unnoticed, unwelcome. Anwen rushed down the steps, her shoes barely touching the floor. She ran through the grand hall, past startled guards, until she reached the royal historian's room. It was a cozy chamber filled with scrolls, dusty tomes, and the soft ticking of an enchanted hourglass. Master Cedric, the historian, sat dozing in a velvet chair, his spectacles slipping down his nose. Anwen didn't knock. She didn't wait. She simply said the words that lit the fire. The queen's birthday has been forgotten. Cedric's eyes snapped open. He blinked. Once, twice. Then he sat bolt upright, knocking over a pile of parchment. Forgotten impossible. But the truth crept in, undeniable. He had written no speech, sent no reminders, prepared no scrolls. The royal calendar, gilded with gold ink and hung on the chamber wall, showed the date clearly. Today, the last day of Blossomtide, the queen's birthday. Cedric stood in a flurry of motion, calling for scribes, shouting for pages, but they were too late. The day was already half spent, and not a single ribbon had been hung. Meanwhile, In the queen's tower, silence stretched long and strange. Queen Meralda, wise and kind, had not mentioned her birthday once. Not to her advisors, not to her maids, not to anyone. She simply went about her day, writing letters to distant kingdoms, tending to the tiny plants on her windowsill, and feeding the golden fish in her bowl. But deep inside, something old and quiet stirred an ache, perhaps, or a hope. For Queen Meralda's birthday was no ordinary day. Each year, on this one day, a hidden room deep within the palace opened, a room no one could enter but the queen. It was called the Chamber of Wishes. Inside, the queen was allowed to make one true wish, not for herself, but for her people. And each year, that wish shaped the kingdom sometimes gently, like a breeze through trees, sometimes boldly, like a sunburst after rain. But this year, with no one to mark the day, the chamber remained closed. The queen, bound by ancient magic, could not enter unless she was truly remembered. And so the silver moth fluttered alone, its wings growing dimmer with each passing hour. Anwen knew the legends. She remembered her grandmother's voice telling tales by candlelight. The queen's birthday is the kingdom's breath. If forgotten, the heart of Leora fades. She didn't hesitate. With Master Cedric stumbling after her, she rushed through the lower halls and into the old servants' stairwell, a place few still used. There, behind a faded tapestry of the first harvest festival, lay a hidden door. Anwen pushed it open, revealing a dusty corridor lined with murals of Leora's past queens. Together, they followed the winding path until it opened into the old memory hall, a forgotten gallery where enchanted paintings whispered stories to those who listened. Anwen stood before the largest painting, a portrait of Queen Meralda on her 21st birthday, when she'd first unlocked the Chamber of Wishes. The painting shimmered faintly, its colors flickering. The queen in the image turned her head, ever so slightly, and her eyes seemed to meet Anwen's. A quiet voice stirred in the room, no louder than the flutter of wings. "Remember me, and the chamber will open." Cedric, breathless and pale, stared. He'd studied magic his whole life, yet he had never seen the portrait move. He nodded slowly and began to chant an old rhyme of memory and time, the one reserved only for royal celebrations. Anwen ran again, this time to the palace courtyard. She gathered anyone she could find: gardeners, guards, cooks, and scribes. She told them of the forgotten day, of the queen's silence, of the silver moth now fading in the sky. One by one, faces lit with understanding, with regret, with love they had not meant to forget. Life had simply filled the day with other things, but now they would remember. They worked as one, stringing garlands of ivy and bellflower, baking honey cakes with sugared violets, and weaving long banners of gold and green. The trumpeters found their horns, long silent, and polished them until they shone. Even the smallest children gathered pebbles to spell out the queen's name near the palace gate. And above it all, Anwen climbed to the bell tower. Her hands trembled, but she did not waver. With all her strength, she pulled the great bell rope. The chime rang out like a wave of light. It echoed across the rooftops, through the trees, into the deepest chambers of the palace. It was not just sound, it was memory, returning. The queen's birthday had been found again. In her tower, Queen Meralda paused. The brush slipped from her hand. She turned toward the window, where the sound of the bell wrapped around her like a warm shawl. Her heart stirred, then bloomed. Far below, the silver moth brightened, its wings now radiant with light. And deep within the palace, beneath stone and spell, the Chamber of Wishes began to glow. Its doors, closed for too long, gave a soft sigh, and slowly, silently, they began to open. The doors of the Chamber of Wishes creaked open, but the queen did not rise at once. She stood by her window, gazing at the gathering below. From the highest tower, she could see her people working together, laughing, sweating, hurrying. Flowers lined the palace steps. Torches had been lit even in daylight, and above the grand archway, her name shimmered in stone's Meralda. She pressed her hand to her heart, feeling its gentle thud. But even with the celebrations rising and the silver moth gleaming once more, the queen hesitated. The chamber waited, golden and aglow beneath her feet. And yet her steps felt heavy. For this year, the forgetting had pierced deeper than she had known. and with the forgetting came doubt. She crossed the hall slowly, her silken slippers brushing the polished floor. Guards bowed low, servants stepped back, but no words were spoken. Her gown whispered against the walls as she descended the hidden spiral staircase, where no one but a queen could go. Far below the palace, the chamber shimmered like a cave of stars. Every surface glowed: walls, ceiling, even the floor illuminated by the softest magic ever spun. In its center stood the wish mirror, a great pool of still water rimmed with silver light. It reflected nothing but the heart of the queen who stood before it. No face, no crown, only the truth inside. Queen Merelda stepped into the chamber and stood before the wish mirror. The water rippled gently, as if it already knew her thoughts. Her hands trembled slightly, though her face remained calm. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft and steady, like wind through tall grass. She told the chamber of her people, their joys and sorrows, their growth and dreams. She spoke of harvests and winters, of festivals and quiet days, of laughter in the kitchens, and stories whispered at bedtime. She told of Anwen's courage, of Cedric's devotion, of the guards who never failed their watch, and finally, she told of the forgetting. Her voice faltered. This year, no candles were lit for her, no songs were sung, and for a moment, just one, she had wondered if her heart still beat in time with the kingdom's pride, if her place as queen still mattered, if she had become, somehow, invisible. The wish mirror shimmered, then stilled. It did not show an answer, only waited. The queen closed her eyes, and in that breath, that pause, she remembered something not even the chamber could show her, a tiny memory from long ago, when she had been a girl with scraped knees and tangled hair, peeking into the royal garden with her mother beside her. Her mother had said, "A queen's light is not in how many remember her face, but in how many carry her kindness." Merelda opened her eyes. She knew her wish, but before she could speak it, the chamber darkened. A shadow crept across the glowing walls. The silver light flickered, and the water in the wish mirror trembled. The silver moth, which had hovered just outside the chamber's reach, beat its wings wildly, casting frantic patterns of light. The queen turned sharply. From the deepest part of the chamber's edge, something stirred, a figure of mist and memory. It rose slowly, shape-shifting, curling like smoke into the form of a pale, thin woman in a cracked crown. Her eyes were hollow, her voice no more than a sigh of forgotten dreams. It was the spirit of the unremembered. Every 100 years, she came, only when a birthday was forgotten, only when the chamber opened with sadness still clinging to the queen's heart. She fed on doubt and faded hope. And now, she reached out long, shadowy fingers toward the queen. She whispered wordlessly, her presence cold and heavy. The queen's heart thudded once more, and the silver moth faltered in the air. The chamber's glow dimmed. Queen Merelda stood her ground. She did not step back. Her voice remained steady, even as the shadow's chill reached her skin. She spoke not to the spirit, but to the chamber. She wished not for gold, nor peace, nor riches, but for remembrance. Not of her name, nor her crown, but of kindness. That the people of Leora would remember kindness in their days ahead. That, in forgetting, they would find deeper remembering. That in silence, they would learn to listen. That the smallest act of love would shine brighter than any trumpet or firework. The wish mirror surged with light. The chamber filled with warmth. Golden vines bloomed along the stone. The silver moth burst into radiance. And the spirit, who had hovered so near, let out a silent gasp and began to dissolve like mist in sunlight. For no shadow could stand against a wish made not from pride, but from love. The chamber pulsed, once, twice, then settled into stillness. The doors opened fully, and the silver moth flew through, circling the queen before rising toward the sky above. Queen Merelda climbed the spiral stairs slowly, her hands brushing the stone walls that now glowed with delicate flower patterns. At the top, the doors opened onto the courtyard, and there her people waited. Hundreds of faces turned toward her. Some carried garlands, some held candles, some only had their hands folded over their hearts. But all of them looked to her not with guilt or worry, but with warmth. They remembered not just the day, but her laughter, her wisdom, her gentleness. And now they would not forget again. Anwen stepped forward first, her basket still in hand. Though most of the lavender had been scattered along the path, she bowed low. The queen smiled and stepped into the light, her gown trailing stardust, not because of magic, but because the chamber had awakened her deepest wish, and her people had answered it. As Queen Merelda stepped fully into the courtyard, the sun broke through the last veil of clouds, casting golden beams across the castle walls. The silver moth hovered above her for one final moment, then drifted higher into the sky, vanishing like a promise kept. A hush fell over the crowd, as if all of Leora were holding its breath. Then, from somewhere near the palace gate, a soft sound began to rise, the tinkling of chimes made from shells and crystal. It was followed by the gentle beat of a hand drum, then the whisper of flutes. The court musicians had arrived, not with fanfare, but with the music of morning winds and forest glades. The queen walked among her people without a crown, without guards at her side. She stopped to touch the shoulder of a baker who had brought warm honey cakes. She smiled at an old gardener who had woven her name into ivy. She knelt beside a child who held a drawing of the palace, her own image drawn in 1,000 crayon colors. All around, the people of Leora offered small tokens, no grand gifts or treasures, but folded notes, flower bracelets, polished stones, and bits of ribbon. Meralda accepted each one as if it were a jewel, for these were not gifts given from tradition, but from remembrance found again. Anwen watched from the stone steps, her heart swelling as she saw the queen surrounded by love, not ceremony. Cedric stood beside her, his scrolls forgotten under one arm. Even he, who had once believed all wisdom was written in books, now understood that some truths live only in the heart. A breeze stirred, and the great palace bell tolled once more, not as a warning or a call, but as a song. Its low note echoed across the city and into the hills, where farmers paused their work and villagers looked toward the castle with sudden smiles. Somewhere, far away, a little girl tugged at her mother's sleeve and asked if today was a special day. "Oh, yes," the mother replied. "Today is the day we remember." In the palace courtyard, the queen sat upon the edge of the great fountain, her feet resting gently on its cool stone. Around her, laughter bubbled up like spring water. No grand throne was needed here. She listened to stories told by children, to poems offered by candle makers, to quiet thanks whispered by those who had once stood in line for food during a long-ago drought. And with each voice, her heart filled more. Then, just as the sun began to slide toward the horizon, she rose and lifted her hand. The courtyard stilled again. Even the peacocks froze mid-strut. She did not speak. She didn't need to. Instead, she reached into the folds of her gown and drew out a single ribbon of silver thread woven by the chamber itself, a sign of her wish fulfilled. She handed it to Anwen, who blinked in surprise. The queen placed a hand over Anwen's and held it there. The meaning was clear. The future of Leora did not lie in scrolls or crowns, but in hearts like Anwen's, brave, kind, and watchful. Anwen swallowed hard. In her palm, the ribbon shimmered softly. She clutched it close, not out of pride, but out of quiet wonder. That evening, as stars began to wink above the turrets and towers, the people of Leora gathered on the hill behind the palace. The queen joined them, walking without guards, without robe or title, only as Meralda. They sat in circles. They lit lanterns, not in rows or ranks, but as families, as neighbors. Each lantern held a tiny slip of paper, a memory written by hand. Some read of the queen's fairness during a stormy season. Some told of her laugh when she visited the village fair. Some, even simpler, told how she once helped a lost child find her way. As the lanterns rose, they lit the sky with more than flame. They carried the soul of a kingdom. Merelda watched until the last lantern vanished among the stars. Then she closed her eyes. She no longer felt forgotten. She felt whole. Back in the chamber beneath the palace, the wish mirror stilled into glass, its surface smooth and glowing. Though no footsteps echoed within, the room pulsed once more, as if sighing in contentment. It would sleep again until the next birthday, waiting, as it always did, for a wish born not from grandeur, but from love. And above it, in the warm lights of the palace windows, the queen returned to her study. There, on her desk, lay the only thing she had truly needed that morning, a hand-drawn card, crooked and smudged, left by Anwen. It had 3 words on the front: "We remember you." Uh. She placed it gently on the shelf above her chair, beside a faded flower from her coronation, and a stone carved long ago by her mother. These were the treasures no forgetting could ever take. Outside, the celebration faded into quiet song. The children yawned, the candles melted low, and the sky wrapped the kingdom in soft blue velvet. Peace settled over Leora, not as silence, but as a promise kept. And as the queen turned in for the night, the last silver shimmer of the moth brushed past her window and disappeared into the moonlit sky. Moral: true remembrance comes not from grand displays or loud cheers, but from the kindness we carry, the love we share, and the courage to remember even when the world forgets.